Today I would like to show you suppression rules. The suppression rules library gives an opportunity to define rules that will be used to suppress clashes that are allowable during the project. Always we have to define the name and the reason of the suppression. So we'll start with the modified clash detection test. So we need to wait to load all the steps. After that, we'll just scroll down to the suppression rule. Click that and we'll see the suppression rule window. Click the plus sign so we will open the suppression rule library. As you can see, we've got a predefined 14 types of the suppression rules. So we'll start with the first one. This first one suppresses the clashes if one of the clashing elements is of the type and the other is with defined type. So in other words, in that case, both of the elements must be defined by picking them from the schema and the class. We can see that in the rule, just need to wait to load it. As you can see, for the very beginning, we need to define the name. So for these purposes, I will just name it the first suppression rule. And for the vital purposes, I will just copy that name to the reason, so I will have the name and the reason the same. For next, I would like just to define the suppression rules according to the schema. So let's choose the building template normal metric with the class wall. And for the second type, I will choose the same schema. However, I will just pick up another class. In that case, will be window. To explain that simply, any clash between the wall and a window within that schema will be suppressed and neglected concerning the definition of the suppression rule. Next, we'll have the suppression rule in the table. Clicking plus sign going to the second suppression rule will define the suppressed clashes if one of the elements is defined type. It is kind of a simplification of the previous rule. Here it is necessary to define just only one class. Everything that is clashing with that will be suppressed. So it's all about that simple rule. Clicking next, we've got the third suppression rule. It suppresses clashes if one of the elements has the property that satisfies the expression and the other element has the property that satisfies other or the same expression. So in that case, we just need to define both elements, schema, classes, properties, as well as the quantifiers for that given property. So as you can see, we've got several types of quantifiers. So it's equal, unequal, like null, or it's not null. So once you put the value right here, you need to define also the second property. After that, you click apply and you will see the clashes between those two elements that are really specified will be suppressed. Next suppression rule is define clashes if one of the clashing elements has a property that satisfies the expression. It's a simplification of the previous rule. Here it is necessary to define just only one property within a given class and schema to generate a given expression. Everything that is clashing with that element will be simply suppressed. In the next suppression rule, we suppress clashes if the property on one of the clashing element is equal or not equal to the same property on the other clashing element. We need to define the schema, class, property, and operator that we need to use. If there will be element with the same property clashing, that collision will be suppressed. An example, that could be parapets on the road car. In the model, they will clash, but during the construction, it will be easily solved. For the next suppression rule, this suppressed clashes if one of the clashing element is in the category that match the category ID. In that case, we are defining just the category within which clashes will be suppressed. That can be used, for example, to the insulation versus insulation clash in a piping, if of course this is allowable for the project or for the investor. Next is the suppress rule that suppress clashes if one of the clashing elements is in the category with the name matching the expression and the other is in the category with the name matching some other expressions or the same expression. Here it is necessary to define two different categories for which clashes will be allowable and its results will be suppressed. That could be used for the maintenance regions or the even loop for some work, of course if it is allowable. Next, suppression rules suppress clashes if the clashing elements are in the same category. So this is quite self-explanatory. We don't need to define anything despite of the name and the reason. It can be used, for example, to suppress clashes within the safety regions. Next rule suppress clashes if one of the clashing elements is in a model that matches an expression. In that case, we need to specify a model that we would like to suppress clashes with. That could be used, for instance, for existing landscape that will change after the earthworks. Coming back to the list that we've got, next suppress clashes if one of the clashing elements is in the model with the name matching the expression and the other is in the model with the name matching the other type of the expression or the same expression. It is a more advanced option of the previous. It can specify between which models the clashes will be allowable and will be suppressed. That could be used in example for existing landscape and building if they are in a different models. In that case, we neglect the differences in the specific categories. For the very last suppression rule concerning models, it simply suppresses clashes if the clashing elements are in the same model. In that case, we don't need to define anything despite the name of the reason. It can be used, for example, to suppress the clashes in the maintenance region if they are within the same model. Next, three rules are highly connected with ECSQL and the relationships within the schema. So the relationship rules suppress the clashes if one of the clashing elements is related to the other through a specified relationship path. So once we open that, we'll see that we have to define first the schema and the next class. Also, you will see that the next relationship will appear. So for that case, we'll just choose wall. So now we need to add the relationship. So starting with the schema, we can add, for example, the building template normal metric with the class of the building. And the target class will be also with the same schema, so that will be template, building, and the next that will be window. And now we can add also additional relationships by clicking on the plus sign. Of course, this type of the rule is more complicated. In the schema, we can find many relationships between some classes, and these relationships can be expressed in this rule. To see all of them, the best is to use the Schema Explorer, which is accessible from the iModel console. This type of the rule can be connected with, in example, bolts, and the number of the bolts is strongly related with the number of the washers and the number of the nuts. This is especially case when you are speaking about the mechanics like a piping design or piping engineering. Next two rules are connected with the ECSQL expression that is developed within the iModel console. It suppresses clashes if two clashing elements satisfy the ECSQL expression. In that case, it is necessary to define the ECSQL expression to identify the elements between which clashing will be suppressed. In that case, in my opinion, this is the most powerful type of the suppression rule, because due to ECSQL, we can select any element that is needed. So for the next, suppression rule is also about ECSQL expressions. It suppresses clashes if any one of the clashing elements satisfies of the ECSQL expression. This is kind of a more general case of the previous rule. In that elements are selected using ECSQL expression. Any clash with those elements will be suppressed. So now we are done with all suppression rules.